LaCroix. So delicious. I'm addicted. What's going on, everybody? Leo here, and thanks so much for checking out episode 5 of the Creative Library Podcast. If you are new, welcome. We are coming at you in both video and audio format. That means if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, you can also find this episode in video form on YouTube. Just go ahead and search The Creative Library, and you should be able to find us there. And vice versa, if you're on YouTube watching the video, you can find us in audio format. Just search The Creative Library in your favorite podcast app. So, yeah, episode 5. Awesome. I think there's like a stat out there that says the 70 or 80% of new podcasts don't make it past the 4th or 5th episode or something like that. We did it. Yeah, I mean, and I have a couple of interviews still in the bag, so we are definitely going to pass that mark. So good job, everybody. But yeah, and I mean, this week is actually going to be a little different than normal. We're going to take just a week break. Excuse me. We're going to take a week break from the interviews, and I just wanted to take a little time to share what I've been learning personally. And I feel like the resources that I've come across are good enough to a point where I think you guys would also benefit from it. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, for me personally, I think it's just really cool growing and pushing myself as a creative. You know, I love listening to people who know way more than I do just to make myself feel like super small and like an idiot. Because it humbles me. It shows me that there's still so much to learn. And it challenges me. You know, I love that challenge. And in the world of filmmaking is so massive. I mean, just the basics of video, the basics of lighting, and the basics of audio, just those 3 components of making a good film, they each have their own just massive world that you could dive into and explore for years and still not know everything about them. And as a filmmaker, as where we are, we just have to know at least a little bit of each of those worlds. And I don't know, to me, maybe I sound crazy, but to me that just sounds awesome, and I love not knowing a lot. So yeah, so that's where I am right now, and I thought sharing the resources that I've been coming across lately, giving that to you guys, having y'all check it out yourself, that might be helpful for the listeners of this podcast. And before we get into the episode, this podcast is brought to you by Soundstripe.com. If you've never heard of Soundstripe, they are a music licensing company. Whether you're shooting for corporate, weddings, church videos, personal videos, no matter what kind of video you're shooting, you need to license music if you're going to distribute that across the interwebs. And Soundstripe is the place to do it from. For $10 a month or $97 a year, you're getting some high quality music that you can license and use in all of your videos. For $10 a month, you can download as many songs, you can license as many songs as you want within that month. Or $97 a year, all year long, you can license as many songs as you want. It's a flat fee, flat rate, and this is really good music. And yeah, so awesome stuff. This whole channel, the majority of the music comes from them. I personally use them. I'm personally on the year-long plan, and definitely recommend them if you need to license some music. So that's it for Soundstripe. They're awesome. And let's go ahead and hop into the episode. So my big thing lately that I've been learning has been all about lighting. Lighting is so key. And before hopping into lighting itself, I'm going to share with y'all how I came across the importance of lighting. So I'm a huge fan of podcasts, if you can't tell already. And I've personally been a fan lately of podcasts that are hosted by DPs. If you don't know what a DP is, that's a director of photography. They're usually found on sets of films, like actual movies. These are the individuals that are in charge of executing the actual look of the film. I'm not talking about the grade, like the colors of the film. I'm talking about like actually executing the film, the video, like you're shooting a video. They're the person that's the head over all of that. The director, drives the rest of everything, like the story and all that. But the DP, director of photography, he or she is in charge of executing the look of the film. And I've been, or actually before hopping into that, I've always been really intimidated by DPs because it just seems like they are 50 steps ahead of me, 50, whatever. And just they're working with, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gear. And it's stuff that I would never, ever be able to attain, at least in the foreseeable future. But I actually came across a couple podcasts where these DPs are working on smaller commercials or music videos, and they're showing their stuff on YouTube or just on podcast form, and they're on Facebook and stuff. And it was just kind of like a little stepping stone into that realm. And listening to these guys really made that world of the DP world a lot more attainable. And the three podcasts that I came across, the first one was actually Matt Workman. His podcast name is Cinematography Database. This dude, he's been a DP for a while. And the next guy is Evan Bourcier. His podcast title is the Super Secret Filmcast. Both of these guys are in the Boston, New York area, like the Northeast. And I mean, they're just really good at what they do. I definitely recommend checking them out. They're all about, breaking down Matt Workman, what he does on his YouTube channel. He does a lot of gear reviews, but he also breaks down the lighting setup and the cinematography of, movies and music videos. And, he'll break down all these pieces of equipment that I've just never even heard of because I've never been on a set. But it's been really cool hearing from someone who's been in that world, being able to step out of it and be able to show and teach us people who, have never been on set, allow us a little insight into what that world is like and how these directors and DPs execute these images on set. Evan Bourcier, his podcast is all about interviewing other DPs and just hearing their stories, which has been so fascinating. I mean, he's interviewed guys like Ryan Booth and the Steadicam operator. I can't remember his name, but the Steadicam operator for La La Land, the DP of Star Wars Rogue One. I mean, just these people I would never, ever even think about hearing their story, but being able to hear just a little glimpse of what happens on set and just how hard it is to execute some of these shots that we're seeing in these films. And the last guy, the last podcast that I've been coming across is Patrick O'Sullivan's. His podcast title is the Wandering DP Podcast. Patrick is an American, but he currently lives in Australia. He's a DP out there, and this guy was the biggest game changer for me personally. Excuse me, because he's a DP. He shoots commercials, 15, 30-second spots. But what he does, he comes back and he takes screenshots of all of his work, and he also takes behind-the-scenes shots of the sets, and he actually, in his podcast, he actually does full breakdowns of the equipment, the lighting, how he set up the shot. And I mean, it's so fascinating to hear the obstacles that he comes across on set when it comes to lighting and how he overcomes it. And so with all these three guys, Evan, Matt, and Patrick, and there's plenty more, but these three guys have really opened my eyes. The main piece of equipment that they've all talked about, which is of the biggest importance, is not the camera, it's not the lenses, but it's all about the lighting. And what I love, what caught my eye of all these three guys was just how much they were able to like get a consistent image in all of their films, a consistent look when it comes to lighting. And it blew me away just how much they actually focused on lighting. And just to clarify, when I say lighting, I'm not talking about just, pointing a light source at their subject, but I'm talking about like they're actually like manipulating the light to do exactly what they want it to do to capture the image that they want. I mean, these guys are really like painting their images with light. I mean, they're, yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, so, I mean, I don't know, you may be listening, if you know me at all, I'm a wedding videographer. I am not a DP. And you may be asking like, why are you listening to these guys if you'll never be able to translate, that over to wedding videos? Like, I'm never going to have, full sets of, lighting equipment and all that. I'm never, and these guys are shooting with like Reds and Alexas. And, if you don't know those cameras, they're like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 cameras, fully kitted out, easily over 100. I'm never going to shoot with that. At least I'm a wedding right now. I'm not going to shoot with that. But, what I've been learning is the way these guys see their sets, see lighting, see the obstacles that are in their way to execute their images. I'm seeing how they problem solve for those obstacles and get the image that they want. And so for me, as I can kind of like replicate in my own house, like I can put I can grab my Aperture LS1 and put it behind a shower curtain and shoot it through to get like a really soft light and, do like a mock interview kind of thing just to try to understand lighting a little bit better. Like I can do all of that here, but when I'm on a wedding shoot, I'll be able to look for the things that I want in an image. And if I can't get it, in the room that I'm in, I'll be able to adapt a lot quicker because I'll be able to reference back to how these guys execute their images. So that's the way that I see it. I don't know if that made any sense, but, it just makes sense in my mind. It's like, man, the more that I push myself to things that I'm not able to use right now, the more that I'll be able to execute the image that I can get right now. But yeah, so, and also I'm going to be investing in some Aperture lights for my wedding videos, some more Aperture lights for my wedding videos this year. So yeah, I just want to learn all I can about lighting. So these three guys have been have made a huge impact on my work recently. I actually even shot a video, which I'll talk about later, and I was able to apply some of the things that I've been learning from these guys. The last thing I want to talk about is actually a video that I watched on YouTube. I'll leave a link to it below in the description and in the show notes. I don't know if this is the actual name of the video, but on YouTube, the title of it was Cinematographer Style 2006. And what this was a video or a film. It's like an hour and something long. But it was a whole bunch of interviews compiled together of these cinematographers, of these DPs, all sharing their experiences of being on set and, not breaking down, but just sharing, like what kind of equipment they used, cameras and lighting and what it actually means to be a cinematographer, what it means to be a DP, the good and the bad of everything when it comes to being on set. And rather than going through that whole video, I just wanted, what I wanted to do is just like share a couple things that these cinematographers shared when it came to lighting. So, one of them, I can't remember his name, but he talked about when he was a younger kid, he was on a baseball team. And one of his coaches, he would always say, keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. And he was like, yeah, I get it. It's fine. And a couple years later, he had another coach, and he said, keep your eye on the ball. But rather than just stopping there, he said, keep your eye on this part of the ball. And he went so far as to actually put a face on the baseball, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And he says, keep your eye on this part of the ball, pointing to the mouth. The reason being is that if he hit the ball on straight on the nose part of the ball, that ball would just go flat. It would just stay in the infield. You could hit it hard, but it would just stay in the infield. But when he focused on the mouth part of the ball with enough force, now you're aiming for a home run. Like you're gonna knock that thing out of the park. Physics. Awesome. And so this cinematographer, he was like, and the way that I'm relating that to lighting is it's very similar. I mean, it's not just about lighting a scene, but it's about precision lighting. It's about knowing exactly what you want to show on screen. Because what you're really doing is you're painting an image with light. And that's the way of how you begin to execute telling a story in video form. It starts with the lighting. Another quote was, a good cinematographer doesn't really use light. They use shadows. And I thought that was really interesting because, I mean, he's right. I mean, a light source, when it comes to video, like what it really does is light is used to, at the most basic level, it's used to just illuminate a subject so that the camera can pick it up. It's used to create an illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2D screen. But that's what light has to do. What light can do is light can tell an emotion. It can evoke an emotion. It can tell story. You have to know what kind of story you're telling before you actually even light a scene. Because what lighting can do, it can either clearly communicate to your audience what it's seeing, or at the same time, lighting can also leave your audience guessing. And I mean, if you think about it, like if you have a high key on a subject that, the audience can see everything on whatever subject you're pointing the camera at, nothing is left for speculation pretty much. But let's say you backlight a person and now that person's in a silhouette. Now that person is now the audience is might be feeling a little scared, because they can't see what's in that silhouette. And you're leaving the audience guessing. So I definitely recommend going to watch that film. Like I said, it's an hour and something long, and the directors, the cinematographers, they just go into so much detail, way more detail than I can go over in 20 minutes or so, however long this episode's going to be. And yeah, definitely go check that out. But what I'm going to leave you with is a little exercise that I learned from Patrick O'Sullivan. He's the host of the Wandering DP podcast. And the main thing that I learned from him was actually a technique of learning how to execute an image. So let's say you're going through Vimeo and you come across a video that you really enjoy. You like the lighting, you like the way that they have done things, and you want to learn how they actually lit the scene. Well, what you can do is actually just do a quick screenshot of that, whatever image you have, bring that into Premiere or Resolve or whatever, something that has lumetri, or something that has waveform or some scopes, and just look at the lighting values of that screenshot. Even better, if you can get false color, that'll give you a much more accurate representation of the lighting scenario. But no matter what look you're going for, whether it's like a really high key, everything really well lit, or if you want to go for a gloomy, really dark and moody kind of shoot, you can bring that into Premiere, bring that into Resolve, and just break down the lighting levels. He talks about, the key to fill ratio, or, the ratio of the subject that you're shooting to the background. Figure out what those ratios are, and, do that over and over again. I've been doing it. I have 15, 20 references right now. I'm sure he probably has, Patrick probably has hundreds of references that he's looked at. But as you start studying those images, you're going to start realizing a pattern of lighting. And yeah, you're going to be able to practice those ratios that you're finding in those images. So let's say, the key side of the face that you're shooting is about, a half stop brighter than the darker side, the one that's away from the key light. Or maybe the subject is, lit well, and then you notice that in a lot of your reference images that you really like, the background is about 2 to 3 stops under, has a 2 to 3 stop under compared to the subject that's being shot. If you're starting to find that now, when you go to shoot an interview, you'll be able to replicate that, and you'll be able to consistently hit that image that you enjoy shooting. That was something that's so simple. I don't know why I never even thought of doing that, but I started doing that, and it was just fascinating. For me personally, I started noticing that I really enjoyed seeing skin tone values around the 65 IRE mark. If you don't know what that is, it's like if you look in the waveform monitor on whatever NLE you're using, the Luma values, you have 0 all the way to 100. And for me personally, I've just really enjoyed skin tones around 65. And I actually shot a video when I was away hanging out with my in-laws. It was a boat ride, and you can actually find that video on our YouTube channel. But what I did, I set my GH4 to start. I set the zebras on the GH4 to set. They were set at around 65, and because that's what I liked, that's what I started seeing in those reference images that I had. And so that whole video was just a test of, I'm not lighting the scene. It was all sun. It was all just the sun doing the work, but I set the zebras to 65, and I just trusted the camera, trusted myself, and shot it, and it turned out really cool. I really enjoyed it. And a little perk that I noticed is I was definitely exposing less than what I normally would, but a perk of that was I retained a lot more skin tones in my images. also, even in the sky, I was retaining a lot more information in the sky, which was really, really cool. Something I didn't even think would happen. But, and I mean, on the GH4 doesn't have that much dynamic range. I wasn't even shooting in Vlog. I was shooting in a natural profile. I think the GH4 has 10 stops of dynamic range, and in Vlog it has 12. I was still shooting in 10, the 10 stops of dynamic range, but you could clearly see the sky, you could clearly see skin tones. Things did fall to black, but it still looked a little bit more natural, and I really enjoyed that. So obviously, I'm still at the very beginning of learning all this, but I just wanted to share with you, just little practice videos that I'm doing. That's what I've been learning lately, is just learning everything I can about lighting. Again, I'm at the very, very beginning of all of this. I knew I was going to get into lighting, and so that's why I invested in a really high quality light, like the Aperture LS1S, daylight balanced. And I've just been having fun with that thing, shooting it through shower curtains, bouncing it off walls, seeing what kind of looks I can get. And I don't know if anybody's like this, but I have a lot of footage that will never be on the internet. And it's a lot of footage of my face, a lot of footage of my wife, just a lot of practice shots. I feel like that's the life of a creative, is just practicing, and putting out the best stuff that you can. But yeah, I don't know. So I mean, I've just been learning a lot. I've been really, really enjoying this whole process, and so I just wanted to bring y'all into it. And I'll leave links to everything that I talked about. So like the different podcasts that I'm listening to, and the video, the Cinematographer Style 2006. I'll leave all of that in the description below and in the show notes below. But that is going to be the end of the episode, coming right at around 30 minutes. Perfect. But yeah, so next week we're going to hop back on to the normal interview style. Still don't know who I'm going to be releasing, but it will be there. So cool. Well, thank y'all so much for listening. I'd love to hear what you're learning. I think that's really fascinating, hearing what other people are learning. Maybe I can hop in on what you're learning too. So leave all of that in the comments below, or if you're listening in the podcast form, go ahead and hop on over to YouTube and leave them in the comments. But yeah, so that's it for this episode. Thank y'all so much, and stay awesome. Peace.